Perfect. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Peter Kirkwood. I'm a strategy professional focused on helping companies profile and prioritize the different paths to growth. The topic that we're here to talk about is what the keys are when you have a growth strategy planned to take it and put it into practice. If that's a new customer segment or a new product offering or even a whole new startup, taking things from theory to practice is where the work strategists do starts to matter. And I know you've all had broad experience with a lot of new initiatives, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the keys are to setting those up for the best transition and trajectory from there. So next, I'd love to take a moment and let each of you introduce yourselves, and then we'll continue on from there. Maybe the order you signed in. If Michael, you'd like to go first.
Sure. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Szycher, and I am, in effect, a serial entrepreneur in the medical devices field. I started 3 companies, and my strategy was to try to make sure that I knew what my exit was going to be. So I really started from the end and then worked back to the beginning. My idea always was that if I developed something with my team, as soon as I knew for a fact that I was going to get FDA approval, because in the medical field, you have to have FDA approval before you can put a product in the market. So once I had FDA approval, I contacted the big boys and I was able to sell the company for a very good price. So that usually was what I did. I did it 3 times and it worked 3 times. I'm happy to say that.
Excellent. Robert.
Sure. So Robert Jaffe, Director of Business Development for Baker Tilly, based in the Philadelphia area, but I focus on developing business across geographies, across industries like private equity, life sciences, technology, and focus on middle market, lower middle market, and middle market companies, mostly private. My background is in investment banking, and then commercial lending, and then way back in the day, practice law. So I'm kind of a transaction person turned full-time business development. And along the way, I've come in contact with many companies in all cycles of their life, from startup to growth to maturity. And right now, Baker Tilly is a top 10 accounting tax advisory firm, and we're on a growth trajectory ourselves. So we are employing some of the same strategies that other companies are using to grow in a competitive professional services environment.
Excellent. It's nice to see both sides of that, putting in practice yourself and coaching others.
Yeah.
All right, Edward.
Well, you can call me Ted.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, Edward's only when I'm in trouble. But that's what comes up on the screen is Edward. I should change that. So I'm a solo practitioner consultant for small to medium-sized med tech companies. I typically end up working with startups, and frequently with a startup that is 1, 2, 3 years out ahead of FDA clearance. I had a long career in medical devices where I held all kinds of positions, started carrying the bag as a salesperson, and worked my way up through various sales and marketing management positions, VP worldwide sales and marketing. And then I was also the president of US operations for an Israeli company. So I've had a lot of experience, but for the last 10 plus years, I've been consulting under the name Medical Device Success. And I also have the Medical Device Success podcast and videocast. And then I have a off LinkedIn community called MedTech Leaders.
Nice. All right. So I guess diving into some of the discussion questions, let's start with the beginning. When you're building or reviewing a business case, what do you think the most important things to bake into that at the planning stage before you start executing or pitching it to make sure that that the concept has a good chance?
Well, I'll start. And
please.
I think something that's very important, especially if you're a couple years out. So let's assume that you do have the luxury of being a couple years ahead of your FDA clearance, and let's assume that it's a new concept product that does require FDA clearance, whether it's a 510K. Hopefully, it's a 510K because that's a lot simpler than a PMA. But if that's where you are, I think something that's very important in the planning process is making sure that you understand the true clinical value of the product and not just what you think it is, but get some help and understand the health economics background, the evidence-based background for that particular technology, um, and understand what that means in terms of how that'll equate to the voice of the customer and an ultimate value proposition, because you may learn some things that you'll want to know before going into any type of clinical work or clinical data gathering to make sure you're gathering data that satisfies what the evidence says is needed. A lot of times people don't do that. They go for a clinical outcome, but they're not going for the economic outcome, and they're not going for other outcomes that are so important.
And those two diverge pretty frequently, or it's just kind of the occasional risk?
It's a big risk. I'm surprised at how many companies don't take this into consideration. I was not trained to take it into consideration. It's only something I've actually learned through consulting. I'll be interviewing a health economics advisor in a couple weeks for my podcast. It's something that people get so caught up in the ivory tower about their technology and what they think it can do, and the few friends that are reinforcing that they don't have a true picture of what the real market may think of it and the evidence that the real market may need to go forward and to take a decision on it.
Excellent, thanks. Michael, would you like to go next?
Sure. Well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to echo a lot of what I heard Ted to say, because, we seem to be in the same field. But what I'm going to do is that I'm really going to, as opposed to being a company that's already a few years out, if I start from the very, very beginning, and I'm going to try to be as simplistic as I possibly can, rather than, because you asked a very complicated question, but I'm going to try to simplify it. Okay. Since many entrepreneurs start their companies because they themselves are technical individuals, they get enamored with the technology. And from my standpoint, the first thing that you need to do is to find out whether or not there is a need in the market for whatever the technology is that you know about. And the second thing is that if in fact there is a need in the market, what is the market size? Because you may be working on something that is extremely advanced, and there's no question that there is a need. But if there is a very small market, as a company, it will be hard to make it work.
Sure. Robert, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you both sort of started, said it well, understanding what the market is and what the opportunity is. And, assuming you get that, I mean, you're always looking at that market, and sometimes market shift, or, your technology shifts to a different product and you find a larger market or a different audience. I think it's surrounding yourself with the right team too, because, Michael, as you said, the founder could be a technologist or very technical, but may not have that business savvy. And so whether you're hiring someone, to round out the business side of it, the operations side, or you're just surrounding yourself with a team of advisors and outside consultants, Ted like you, or someone else, just making sure it's almost like a pit crew. Kind of having the right team around you to help you execute more. Because, when it comes down to it, so much of it is execution.
Yes, and Robert, if I may add to what you have just said for just 1 second, because I think this is extremely important. I don't care who you are and how much you don't know everything. So you are going to have to start looking for a team. And even before you start looking for a team, you need to ask yourself, do I need a co-founder?
Mhm.
And if you need a co-founder, it needs to be somebody that is going to be complementing your knowledge. Because if your co-founder knows as much as you do, all of you guys are going to end up doing is either agreeing with yourselves all the time or disagreeing yourselves all the time, and you're not going to get anywhere. So
Right.
whoever your co-founder is, it better be somebody. So if you're technical, this person may be marketing or financial or whatever it is. So I think that that needs to be truly emphasized.
Yeah.
I'd like to add
Please.
one more thing. And that is early on, you need to understand where the money is going to come from, especially in the med tech industry. So that'd be the potential of a reimbursement strategy, especially if you have a large piece of capital equipment. And a good example is I interviewed the CEO of EDAP TMS several weeks ago. He's had FDA clearance since 2018 and hasn't launched his product. Why?
Ouch.
Wow.
Oh, no, it's great. I'm so impressed with this guy. He got all the clinical work done, got the FDA clearance. He knew what he was doing, but he needed to get the reimbursement work done. So instead of investing a lot of money in marketing and a big sales force in the US, as a French company, he was patient, got the reimbursement work done. That is done now. They have a reimbursement path, and now they're launching. And I'm just so impressed with a guy that kept his powder dry. Going forward, it's a public company, so
It's a lot of discipline.
I convinced my wife to invest in it. But
Nice.
anyway, I think that that's a real important, and that's a good example of where somebody took their time, did it right, and of course they're supported by a lot of other products in lithotripsy, but not all companies have that advantage. But he did.
Yeah. I think a lot of this comes down to like really understanding your customer, how they pay for it, what they need. Perhaps the other side of that coin is also take a minute to look at all the other stakeholders. I usually do entrepreneurship in larger companies, and I like to go around to every department, finance, legal, HR, that may not be where you traditionally say, well, they're the people that are going to drive the growth of this new thing. But they come at it with a different lens. And if they find an idea that's challenging for your concept, just spending 5 minutes and hearing it early is a great risk mitigation. And within the customer, it's not just the person you're pitching the value to, but whoever might dislike the idea. If there's someone who's threatened by the change or losing out because of it, then you've got a detractor you need to plan around too. And it's all workable if you're aware of it, but you need to be a bit deliberate there. So that kind of leads me to my next question is, do any other blind spots or surprises, things that may not be quite as central, but have just caught people unawares? Do you guys have good examples of that type of thing? Sounds like Ted does.
I'd say one of the biggest is people don't have a realistic plan. It goes back to being ivory tower thinking.
Sure.
And they don't take, especially with new technologies, they don't take the technology adoption life cycle curve into consideration. So that's the curve that Jeffrey Moore emphasized in Crossing the Chasm. And the chasm's where a lot of companies die, in between the early adopters and the early majority. So I think that's a big blind spot, is they think they'll come to market, and it's very often in med tech, you'll see this. They get a raise, like a B round or something like that, hire sales force, and they think they can go down and cram it down the doctor's throats or the hospitals. They may have the contracts in place for the hospital systems and such, but they just go right out with a big sales organization, and they a broad brushed approach instead of targeted, and they go after everybody. So they waste time on early majority and laggards and late adopters. They waste time on those people, and their sales drag, and they wonder what's wrong. So I think that's a blind spot.
That makes sense. Robert, do you have a thought?
I mean, I think, similar to what Ted said, I mean, just being focused on the market, but trying not to, I guess, I mean, it also comes back to the, having someone to help, who's been there and done that with you to kind of guide you, like, all right, you've got this device, you're not gonna, you may not manufacture it, you may not build out an entire sales team, maybe you'll, license it to someone else or create a JV. Like they're different, there's different avenues. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and, just have, and again, this is the early side of the business, but they think, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create the next, big device company, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And it's sort of thinking about those options early on and not, not being sort of one-dimensional there.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of the portfolio of options and not having to do it all can often let you move faster at what you do choose to do. And that can be a stronger option. Mike?
Well, in my particular case, since I am now a consultant, and as a matter of fact, I do a lot of consulting to Zoom, believe it or not. So it makes it very convenient for everybody. But coming
Safe
back,
travel.
Absolutely. Coming back to what Ted said, I think that, giving that, most of my expertise is in the medical device field, and especially the type of medical devices that actually contain a drug. They're called combination products. So that the big companies are not really working on it. The big companies wait for a entrepreneurial company to develop it, get the risk out, and then they'll pay you a fortune. Okay, but most of the companies that I deal with are startups or early stage companies. One of the biggest blind spots that I find from the leadership of the company is that they tend to underestimate how much time and effort it will take for them to get FDA approval. So let's say they think is 1x and it turns out to be 3x and they run out of money. It is not easy to do. Am I right, Ted?
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I mean, we always, and when I was working in the industry, we had a joke in sales and marketing that when we were told by the leadership of the company that a product would be available in 6 months, we automatically said a year.
Double it at
makes
least.
sense.
Yeah. Double it at least.
Yeah.
Yep. So
And I think that leads into our next topic about resourcing. It sounds like at one level, it's you probably don't have as much as you think you do, and you need to focus and budget for a longer run. Are there any other resourcing advice that you'd put in terms of more focus on one aspect of the company or another, or certain skill sets that people may not appreciate enough?
Okay, well, I'm going to take a big stop at that one because I went through it 3 times. Many technical people can get up and give a terrific technical presentation to other technical people. But one of the things that you need to do is that you need to go out and raise capital. And a lot of technical people, believe it or not, fall on their face on that because they don't know how to speak the financial language that is necessary for investors to take the risk to put money into their company.
Yeah. That's a key one, and it doesn't feel like value add, so it's easy to overlook. But Robert?
Yeah, I mean, sort of a similar thing, sort of understanding, the team and who can help with that fundraising, right? You don't know everything, but it's, and again, you don't have to have a big team with you. I mean, you don't have to hire, you could hire outside advisors like Ted or Mike, or us to kind of to be that partner and help with either, advising on the fundraising or advising on the market access or commercialization plan. So again, I know I keep going back to it, but it really is, making sure you sort of focus on what counts and bringing in as needed the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add that your resources are essentially people and money early on. Um, and of course, if you're a larger firm that's launching new things, and you might have facilities here and there, but people and money's a tough thing to manage. I agree with Michael. You got to raise the funds, and then you have to be very careful as you disperse them. You don't want to hold back and shoot yourself in the foot by not having enough money to do a good job doing some marketing steps and or sales
Sure.
steps or development steps. But at the same time, if you spend too much before you're ready, then you have a problem. You'll run out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes,
Uh,
and I think that something else is very important for entrepreneurs, first time entrepreneurs, and that is if you're going to raise money, the chances are it's going to be based on that you are offering shares in the company.
Mhm.
Be sure you understand how much percentage of your company you're giving for what amount, based on the total level of financing that you're going to do. So if it's going to take 3 rounds of financing, be absolutely sure that you understand those 3 rounds before you give up the farm.
Yeah. So I guess on a similar vein, when you're bringing people in, finding the right skill sets and everything makes a lot of sense. One headache I've run into is it just takes longer than you want. And whether that's a startup or getting people allocated within a larger company, if your business plan sounds great today, 6 months from now, you could be missing the market. So moving quick is hard. When you onboard people, what do you think is important for them to know in terms of your vision and where you're going? I find if you just plug someone in and say, you're the project manager, do project manager stuff, they're definitely not as bought in, and you need more of that buy-in. So how do you get people really committed and to have the same vision as you're starting with?
Okay, well, in that case, let me start, and then I want to hear from the other 2 guys, because I'm here to learn more than speak, as a matter of fact. Okay, I think that this is where strategy comes in. You have a vision. So your strategy and your tactics is something that the key employees that you're bringing in, you really need to be very, very clear in communicating what your vision is, so that you can then bring them on board and have them really help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really important to have people bought in from the beginning. That's part of the recruiting process. It starts when you're recruiting, is that they have to be interested in the story. If it's a small company or a startup, they're in something of a risky situation, and there will be rewards. So there has to be some compensation related to that. But I think they have to be bought into the concept and the mission of the company. So that's just something that starts actually in the recruiting process.
Yeah.
I mean, and we do that. I mean, at Baker Tilly, obviously, we're an accounting or advisory firm, but, no one thinks of us, as accounting firms as entrepreneurial, so to speak. But, to attract good people, you have to kind of say, this is not just a day job. This is our vision. This is our strategy. And what is it, like culture eats strategy for breakfast or something like that? I mean, you really have to create a culture that, as you said, is a lot, everyone understands and that you're aligned with, because, we work hard, but we also play hard. And we have fun doing. And I think, we keep a lot of our clients because, we're just offer pragmatic advice, and we've kind of been there and done that with you. So whether it's, a healthcare consultant group, or, we're doing your audit or taxes, we are, I think we're all trying to, so we consider ourselves value architects. And so that's our, kind of that corny tagline, but it's how we, what we think of ourselves. We sort of work with companies to to add value or enhance value. And it helps a lot in getting everyone on the same page for, what we do. And I've seen other of our clients that are right in, a high growth mode and hiring a lot of people. If they don't have that sort of culture or that, the vision, then, you can hire as many people as possible. You'll just have churn and you won't be as successful. So, kind of outside the box there.
Great. I know we're running out of time. I'd love to wrap up with a short lessons learned story, an example of one startup succeed or fail that you got a great lesson out of. And I'll start with one of my favorite cases is I was working to sell national IDs to Native American Indian nations. And it was a great case if you really had to understand the customer and what mattered to them. It wasn't just having a passport to travel. It was a national sovereignty benefit where it was theirs. They weren't relying on the US government or anyone else to give them that identity document. And we built it out. We were able to take the large identity programs that governments do and shrink it down to 1/10 of the price by virtualizing some infrastructure. And it was great until the political administration changed and the enforcement of the legislation saying it was needed to cross the border went away, and the whole market evaporated in one election. So it's definitely the things you hadn't planned for when everything's looking good that can come out of nowhere if you're not tracking that list of key assumptions. Anyone have another one?
Yeah, I would say that an example of a positive story is soft tissue expanders. I was involved in a company years ago, early in my career, in the development of their very first soft tissue expanders. And we were hampered actually by the inventor. So we were developing the product for an inventor, but he was an unusual character. And in the plastic surgery marketplace and the reconstructive marketplace, people looked down on him, even though his invention was genius. And I even had some of our advisors say, you don't want to use that product. It's probably terrible just because he invented it. So you have to separate personalities from the real logic of the invention. But what we did was we were able to get him to back off and allow some other doctors to get attention related to soft tissue. We had a symposium, and in like a 5-month period, we went from 40 units a month to 400 units a month, just because we brought other people into the conversation to understand the voice of the customer and to help communicate a value proposition. So I think that's a story of being able to, separate some opinions from what you can logically see as fact and finding a way to communicate that.
Beautiful. Michael?
Well, in my particular case, in my first company, because after that I learned my lesson, so there was no problem. We got started. We applied for a patent, and back in those days, I'm talking about 25, 30 years ago. After a couple of years, your patent application was actually issued. So other companies, it doesn't happen anymore, but that's the way it was. Well, we had a patent. After 2 years, the patent went out, and all of a sudden, one fine day, we found out that this huge company was suing us because they said that we were infringing on their patent. Boy, was that, I thought that I was going to lose the company. Well, to make a long story short, they ended up actually licensing the technology from us.
Nice.
But that was, I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep for 6 months.
Yeah, big stakes.
Big stakes.
Robert?
Yeah, sure. So, early in my career, I was working for an economic development organization, and we would give sort of small grants to startups and emerging companies to help them apply for SBIR and STR funding, sort of, federal commercialization grants. And so, I was, again, I'm a business guy. I know more business. I don't know technical. I don't know science. The technical I relied on other folks. But one of the companies that had applied for funding was, out of university, and the technology seemed innovative. It was, a life science company, and so we gave this company, a grant to apply for, funding. They ended up receiving it, but the company never ended up going anywhere because they didn't get the right team there, and it was just the lesson to me is you might like the team, you might like the people, and you might like the science, but I think this goes back to what everyone else has said. If you don't have, an understanding of the market and product fit, then it's not going to go anywhere. And so, I think it's just, again, having the right team there is as crucial as having, the right technology.
Yeah.
Lesson learned. I'm still learning, but one of them.
Always.
Aren't we all?
Well, thank you everybody for joining. I know our time's kind of up. I'll share a link to this recording as soon as I get it posted. But it was great speaking with all of you. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, it's been terrific.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
Robert, I'm in Philadelphia too, so go Sixers.
Yes, go Sixers.
Nice meeting all of you guys. You're terrific.
Nice meeting you guys too.
Thanks.
Hey, nice meeting you. All right,
Bye-bye.
take care.